In a recent discussion about Linux and how Linux tends to have programs written for the lowest common denominator, somebody I was talking with online brought up a program called Scrivener. I had never heard of it, but I looked it up, and lo and behold, there was a Mac version. And so I said, without even looking at the Linux version, I looked at the Mac version briefly. I said, I can tell you all sorts of features that will be in the Mac version that won't exist in the Linux version. And there's not going to be much that's going to be the other way around. Maybe some window widgets to do, window shade, stuff like that. But the actual program is not going to really have that much that's going to be Linux specific. It's going to be lowest common denominator of what you can do. And this is in part because in Linux you don't have the higher stuff, because people who write a program, are they writing it for KDE? Are they writing it for GNOME? What are they writing it for? The ecosystem hasn't really built in any of these higher level tools. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Consistency and usability tools. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I mean. First, we have TextEdit right here. This is a standard Mac program we can compare it to. And before we even get to that comparison, though, let's take a look to see how do you install this program. Just drag it over to Applications. Boom, just drag it over. You don't really even need to do that. I dragged mine to the desktop. The other thing is, if we look at the icon, very crisp and clear. Mac icons tend to be very crisp and clear. They have a very high resolution, big image that makes it easier to work with. Or no, it doesn't even necessarily make it easier to work with. Sorry, it just makes it that it fits the style of the Mac. So let's go ahead and we'll open up Scrivener, and I'm not going to buy it, but I'll say try. And they have all sorts of different options here. I haven't used any of them. I don't really know anything about the program. But I'm going to go ahead and just start their tutorial. And it's going to ask me to save it. I'll put it on my desktop. And I will save it. There we go. So now it's saved. I don't have a specific plan for how I'm going through all the features. I figured maybe just go across the menus and I can compare some of them. And so let's go ahead and do that. First, the menu's in the right place, but on Linux it's going to be in the right place. It'll be attached to the window, as is common for most Linux programs, or if not, it'll be on the top, like it is in some distros or some desktop environments. At least have that option. But let's go through and look at Scrivener. About Scrivener, well, it tells you about it. Click and it goes away. TextEdit, about TextEdit, goes away. Now TextEdit, to be fair, did have that little red dot. Scrivener did not. Okay, slight difference. You can click anywhere and that one will go away. But it's the same basic area. If I'm still in that same menu, let's see. There are services. Let's say I want to go ahead and add a paragraph here, and a lorem ipsum paragraph, and boom, there it is. And it picked up the formatting that was there. If I'm right here, I could say, add that paragraph. Random paragraph. Guess what? Does the exact same thing here. Exact same. It'll add the paragraph. If I add another paragraph here, random paragraphs added. They both have that same thing. Now, this is not something that's built into the Mac. These are services, but pretty much any program that uses text can tap into that. Preferences. Preferences right here, Command comma, using the very Mac-like tabs going across the top. Very Mac-like. TextEdit, Command comma. Takes you to Preferences. That will work in almost any program. Let's go to the File menu. We have Save, or Save As. Well, this one it already is saved. Doesn't need to change anything there, so I'll do Save As. And look at this, very Mac-like. It's the standard Mac sheet. Some Mac programs will have this as a pop-out window. Most of them have it as a sheet. But it has the new folder. This is the standard Mac look. And I can go ahead, click on this guy right here, shrink it down, make it bigger. It does everything the standard Mac one does. Has the search built into it. Now, you might even have that on Linux. You might. It might fit your system. It might not. We'd have to see. Same thing with File, Print. And of course, these ones, the hotkeys will be mostly consistent across the systems, print and save and things like that. Those are pretty consistent, even on Linux. But I'm going to go to Print, where it has the standard Mac preview. Has my PDF services. Boom, right there. has my printer. This is just a standard Mac dialog, or in this case, a sheet. Macs often use sheets, so there it is. Works beautifully. I could change the layout so I have 2 pages. I could change it to 4, 6, whatever. Whatever I want to change it to. This will work like a regular Mac program. It is tied into the Mac, not doing lowest common denominator. Linux, you might even get that. You might get your standard print dialog. Scrivener, quit. I left that one out. Of course, text edit, quit. And of course, it will have print. And we'll just go ahead and take a look at it. I'm not going to go and look at the 2 for every single one, but save as and save as. Now, what Scrivener doesn't have, to be fair, notice the save as didn't show up at first. I had it show up there. That's holding down the Alt key. So the Option key in Mac terms. There's a newer version, a newer way of working stuff which Scrivener has not tapped into, which is some of the features here that tap into the title bar, and those things are all sort of connected. It seems like when programs get one, they get all of them to have this duplicate and revert to, which it doesn't have things like that. One thing I can do here is I'm going to copy, Command-C, and I could paste, edit, paste and match style. Well, watch this. I'm going to come over here. I'll just go down to a new paragraph here. Edit, paste and match style. Paste and match style. That's not something you usually see on Linux, but boom, there it is. Paste and match style. Worked beautifully. Edit, spelling and grammar. Same hotkeys here, and same spelling system. Could go ahead, change it, find next, do whatever. Just like I could in other programs. If I go into here, and I say edit, spelling, same hotkey, and it's going to look much the same. Edit, spelling, Command:, same. Doesn't matter which program I'm in. It's not that there's no program that gets it wrong, but these things are very consistent. Speech. Let's go ahead, select this right here. Sticking with the edit menu, speech. Start speaking.
This tutorial is a Scrivener project which has been provided to help you get started.
And stop it. I could do the same thing here. Now this is of course going to be gibberish text, but edit, speech, start speaking, and it would be stop speaking. It works the same. Start dictation. I can go ahead and dictate to my computer. And I haven't worked with it much. I've seen different reviews. Some people say it works great, some people not so great. But start dictation, emoji and symbols. What do you think we'll find here? Start dictation, emoji and symbols. When you know where those are, they just work on the Mac. They just work. Going to the view menu, hide toolbar. Boom, hides. Show toolbar. Customize toolbar. This toolbar, even in itself, is very Mac-like. Down to, when I right-click on it, I could go to Customize Toolbar. This is very common in programs that have more complex toolbars. There's a few that don't let you change them, but almost all do. Boom, I can go and change it that easily, just like I could on any standard Mac program. Here I could add things to it, could drag stuff off. Let's set it back to the default. I could select icon and text, or text only, icon only. All very much very standard to how the Mac works. View full screen. Well, I'm going to go into Mission Control where I could see my desktops. I right now only have one. There it is. And those are the 2 windows on it. Okay. I can go into full screen. I can get out of full screen. Go into full screen. Okay. That would work very much like the other program. And so let's go ahead, go back to Mission Control. I'll actually use the hotkey to get there. And it says, oh, the full screen is right here. I now have my full desktop. If I had multiple windows open on this desktop, it would show them. It would show those multiple windows. It shows my icons on the desktop, even though I have that full screen, and I could use hotkeys to get back and forth. And I could use hotkeys to get to this where we could see the 2. And then I could say, let's take it out of full screen. I could do it this way also. Very Mac-like. That little flickering there wasn't. That's a little odd. I do have a virtual machine running. Maybe it's using a lot of resources. Let's go ahead. Wasn't even planning this for the video at all, but let's go ahead and take a look at the Linux machine running in a virtual machine. It does have an extra blue dot. That's coherence, where I could have a program floating on the Mac. kind of an added feature, so that programmers aren't limited to these things. But let's do full screen. What do you notice? It did full screen the same way. And if I use that same hotkey, parallels desktop, I could come here, go into full screen. It's going to work the same way. Come here, could do the same thing. They all work the same. There's a consistency. You know how this works. And I'm going to go ahead and take that out of full screen, take that out of full screen. This one alone seems to flicker though, so it might be a slight quirk with the program. Would not be the first time a program had a quirk, but even here, there's going to be a lot of those same things that we've seen. There's not saving, there's not printing as much, so it's not going to be quite the same. But there would be something like hide the program. If I go to here, hide the program, hide others, that just works. They're similar. Doesn't matter which program, once I've learned it, makes things much more efficient, much easier to learn programs, much less likely to make mistakes. We've looked at the toolbar, we've looked at full screen. Okay, fonts. Fonts is another thing. So I can go ahead and change this font, of course, and you could do this in any program in Linux and it will look similar here. I could pick Arial. But what if I want to know Arial is a sans serif? I'm going to go ahead and hold down Command plus, because hey, on a Mac, that usually makes fonts get bigger. That is a sans serif font. None of those little feet on it. Well, what are my other sans serif fonts? I have a whole lot of fonts here. Whole lot. Holy cow, I have more fonts than I know what to do with there. Whole lot of fonts. Okay. Well, I can go to Show Fonts here, or I could go to Format, Font, Show Fonts, and look what I get. It's going to be very Mac-like. Look at fonts. This is the standard Mac tool to look at fonts. And there we go, make that larger. And I was looking for, okay, what are my sans serif fonts? I don't know. Well, style serif, style sans serif. And I could go and look at those, and I know all of these are going to be sans serif fonts, or at least have self-reported to be. I have found some that are incorrect. I don't know if it's serif and sans serif, but some of the handwriting I don't consider to be handwriting. But generally it works. And how is that set up? Is this specific to this program? No. No. I could go into Manage Fonts. It's going to open another program. This is a standard Mac program. To set up the serif or sans serif, the font itself has what languages it has what scripts it works with, location. It will have who makes it. It will have somewhere in there whether it's serif or sans serif. Style regular should have serif or sans serif. Somewhere in there, presumably it does. Well, it knows. Somehow it knows, because all I've had to do that is if I right-click over here and I say Edit Smart Collection, design style is serif. And I could pick any of these, bold, italic, vertical, serif, yeah, whatever, any of those that I want. And it's not just design style, but kind and family name and style name. And I could have if all are true, or I can go ahead and create these lists. Mine are pretty simple, but I can go ahead and have this set up. I could also create, these are smart filling. If I add a new font, they automatically get put here based on what is listed here. If I want to make my own collection, say fantasy, and I have different ones that I use for fantasy games or whatever, I can do that. Just works. And this is standard on any program. Standard any program on the Mac. So if I go here, Format Font, Show Fonts, what am I going to get? Same thing. It's going to be the same thing. Actually, let's go ahead back to that. Let's go Format, Font, Show Fonts. Some things I can do with this. Of course, I could change the font. And these should all be sans serif fonts. Sans serif. And if I go to the serif, of course, they'll all be serifed fonts. Okay, there we go. But I can do more than that. Let's go ahead back to a sans serif. Oh, maybe Arial. I could change the size. Of course, there's other ways to change the size, but this is very typical. I could type in the number right there. Doesn't mean that the size right there won't work. That will still work just fine. Absolutely fine. But you have the standard Mac way of doing it. I could change it from italic to bold, whatever, italic, bold. I could also change the color. I can put a single underline under it and change the color of that. Boom. So I get the underline. That's pretty standard in almost any Mac program. I can make it a double underline if I wanted to. Let's do it, double underline. We'll go back to single. I could do single or double of a strike through. Let's do single there. And instead of having it be black, we'll have it be red. Strike through is now red. That'll work in almost any Mac program. I can change the color of the text. And this is the same color picker I've shown elsewhere. Change it with all sorts of ways. Of course, I probably don't need an HTML color. Maybe I do. But I could go ahead or use the information that I have from somebody else or from a project I'm working on and pick the colors there. Boom, just works. Just works. And it works in the Mac way. This is not the lowest common denominator. I can put a shadow on it. Change the darkness of the shadow. Change how much it's blurred. Change how far away. Change the direction. This is stuff that's pretty typical from the Mac. And look at this, it's all working. And I could search for my fonts. All this typical Mac stuff is here in a program that I'm not even the one who picked. Let's turn that off. But there we go. I could go ahead and change it. And of course, it doesn't mean I have to do it that way. I can just use other fonts that way. I can change the size this way. Not tied to that. Not going to go a whole lot into what ligatures are. But if I go into format and I do font, I could do things like ligatures, use them all or none, standard built into the Mac. Pretty much any program can do that. Kerning, tighten, loosen. I think that's built in the Mac. Some programs might do it different ways. Bold and italic, standard Mac hotkeys. Linux would tend to have those also. Window, the minimize. Linux would probably have that. So nothing here that really jumps out that much. Help? Well, you have help on Linux programs too, but something that you have on Linux that you might not have in most other desktops would be something like this. Quit. And it actually has, this is actually a good one to pick. Quit Scrivener or quit and keep Windows. And notice how it jumps back and forth. I could just click on this right here and it would do it, by the way, but I don't want to. I want to come back over here just to show holding down that Option key has a standard Mac feature. Quit or quit and keep Windows. And actually on a system level can change the default. I just usually have mine quit. Quit and keep Windows means I quit out of it. When I reopen the program, it will open it with all of the windows open that it had before. If I had 4 of these Scrivener projects open, all of them would reopen. That's pretty cool. Let's see, what else does it have? If I right-click on it, right here, look up Begin. This is a Mac tool. This is not something that Scrivener has. They just tapped into the Mac tool. And I have Dictionary, Wikipedia, iTunes Store, and all sorts of other stuff. But usually it's the Dictionary or Wikipedia that I would use. And I could get the source. I could have information on these things. If I go ahead and I pick a different item, by the way, it might have different options here. Dictionary, Wikipedia, movies in this case. And Begin. I don't know. Let's go ahead. iTunes Store again. Let's pick a word like this. Non-English. Yeah, no results found for it. This is just fake Latin is basically what it is. Help. Boom, it just works though. Whatever things. If I had an address in here, it would show me map to it if I wanted. Make changes to it. Make changes. It's that little black dot. Until it saves, which this is doing in the background. Not all programs save, but even then it has that. It'll go away right here. Save. So now I know whether or not it's been saved. Where is it? It's on my desktop. It's right there on my desktop. There it is. What if I rename it? A. It knows the name automatically. If I go to File, Recent Projects, it knows it's A. Even if I close out of this window, and I call this a different name, and we'll call it B. Let's go ahead into here. I'm going to go to File, Recent Projects. It knows it's B. Hasn't even opened it, and it knows that. Boom. Something I just noticed, find all projects in Spotlight. If I had a bunch of projects, it would tap into Spotlight, Apple's search abilities, and find all the projects I have in Spotlight. It's not going to do that in Linux. Probably not. With this B, what if I wanted to mail it to somebody? I knew I can do that. I just get it, drag it, notice by this little icon right there, the proxy icon, and I drag it into Mail, And there it is. There it is, connected. And I can do a quick look with it, and I can see what's in there. I can see what is in that file. Let's close that. This is standard on the Mac. I can go ahead, use quick look right here. Quick look, I know I can hit the space bar on it also. There we go, quick look. And there it is. It shows that file. Let's see, what else? Renaming the files works fine. Open recent. The font selector, notice it also had the color. Let's go ahead and show that. If I have the color selector, it has its own color scheme. This is probably what you see in Linux, but show colors. It's going to show that standard Mac color selector again. Same thing with highlighting. Same thing, I could use the ones that they have built in, or I could show colors. You get the standard Mac tools. This is going above and beyond that lowest common denominator. I have not looked at the Linux program, but I can tell you most of these things aren't there. Most of these things just they're not there. We know that because we know that Linux is programmed for the lowest common denominator. We know that Linux will have few features that the Mac doesn't have. So it's not just, oh, the Mac has these and I'm picking out the Mac-specific things. We know, we haven't looked at the program. I haven't looked at the program. We know the Linux program is not going to have these features that the Mac program does. We know the Linux program is not going to have many features the Mac program doesn't. How do we know that without looking at the program? We know it because we understand the basics of Linux, and we know that Linux is not going to have these things added, the Linux programs, because Linux programs in general are written for the lowest common denominator. They have to be because that's what the Linux ecosystem is. That pretty much gets the point across that the folks in COLA will say, oh no, these things aren't benefits. Keep in mind, you don't have to use these things. You don't have to use the full screen. You don't have to use these extra tools. These are added things. You don't have to right-click on stuff and look it up. You don't have to do that. These are added things. Things that a system that's designed to not be at lowest common denominator has. Very clear, very hard to argue with, very hard to deny if you're being honest. It's clear as can be, and I've now walked you through it. But I'm sure we will see denials.